everybody. Hello again. Time for another story. This is a story about a ladybird and it's called The Bad-Tempered Ladybird. So it's about a ladybird who's not very friendly and always wants to fight with everybody. So it's The Bad-Tempered Ladybird. You ready? Got your listening ears ready? Now these little insects are called aphids and they live on leaves and they love to eat the leaves. The farmers don't like them, but the ladybirds love to eat them. So at 5 o'clock, 2 ladybirds arrive at the same leaf covered with aphids. And the one on the right was very friendly and he said, "Want to share?" But the one on the left was bad-tempered and he said, "I don't want to share." And he wanted to fight for the aphids. So he flew off in a bad temper. And then at 6 o'clock, he met a wasp. And he asked the wasp, "Do you want to fight?" And the wasp said, "If you insist." But the bad-tempered ladybird left. He said, "Oh, you are not big enough," he said. And he flew off. Then at 7 o'clock, he met a stag beetle. See, he's got big claws as well. It's a stag beetle. He's quite big, isn't he, compared to the ladybird? So the ladybird goes to him and says, "Do you want to fight?" And the bad stag beetle goes, "If you insist." And he snapped his stag beetle paw claws. But the ladybird said, "You're not big enough." And he flew off. So at 8 o'clock, he met a praying mantis. It's a funny looking insect, isn't it? It's green and he looks like a bit like a branch on a tree. He's called a praying mantis. So the ladybird says to him, "Do you want to fight?" "If you insist," said the praying mantis. And he moved his legs forward towards the ladybird and the ladybird said, "You're not big enough," he said, and he flew off. And at 9 o'clock, he met a sparrow. A sparrow is like a bird, see? And he says to the sparrow, "Do you want to fight?" And the sparrow said, "If you insist." But he tried to open the beak. He opened the beak and the ladybird says, "Oh, you're not big enough," he said. And he flew off. So at 10 o'clock, he met a lobster. There's a lobster. He's got claws as well. See how tiny the ladybird is and how big the lobster is. "Want to fight?" asked the ladybird. And the lobster said, "If you insist." And he started cracking his claws, opening and shutting his claws. "You're not big enough," said the ladybird, and he flew off. And then at 11 o'clock, he met a skunk. And he says, "Do you want to fight?" And the skunk said, "If you insist." And he lifts up his tail and the ladybird says to him, "You're not big enough." And he flies off. Then at 12 o'clock, he met a snake. And he says to the snake, "Do you want to fight?" And the snake goes, "If you insist. But after lunch." He said, "I'm hungry." But the ladybird said, "You're not big enough." And he flew off. So nobody's big enough for him to fight. Then at 1 o'clock, he meets a hyena. See, it's a bit like a dog or a wolf. It's called a hyena. And the ladybird says to him, "Do you want to fight?" "If you insist," said the hyena, laughing. And he showed his sharp teeth. "You're not big enough," said the ladybird. And he flew away. And then at 2 o'clock, who does he meet? Look, is that? He meets a gorilla. A big gorilla. And he says to the gorilla, "Do you want to fight?" "If you insist," said the gorilla, and he started beating his chest. "You're not big enough," said the ladybird, and he flew away. Then at 3 o'clock, he met a rhino. "Do you want to fight?" asked the ladybird. "If you insist," said the rhino, and he lowered his horn down. "You're not big enough," said the ladybird, and he flew away. Then at 4 o'clock, he met An elephant. The animals are getting bigger and bigger, aren't they? So elephants are really big. And little ladybird says, "Do you want to fight?" And the elephant lifts up his tusk and his trunk and says, "If you insist." And the ladybird says, "You're not big enough." And the ladybird flew away. Then at 5 o'clock, he met a whale. So the whale in the sea. "Do you want to fight?" asked the ladybird, but the whale did not answer. So 15 minutes later, the ladybird flew to the whale near his flipper. "Do you want to fight?" he asked the flipper. And the whale didn't answer him. So at 5:30, the ladybird flew to the whale's fin. That's the top of his fin, the sharp fin at the top. "Do you want to fight?" he asks the fin. But the whale does not reply. It does not say anything. So the ladybird flies on, and he comes to the tail of the whale, and he says to the tail, "Do you want to fight?" And what happens? The whale lifts his tail and he slaps the ladybird